Welcome to the DrunkFriend podcast, a hastily arranged show put together by two retro gaming enthusiasts with opposite levels of YouTubing experience. What's the point of the show? We're glad you asked. The YouTube experience is one wrought with as many rewarding moments as there are super pitfalls, pun intended. I'm Travis, aka NESFriend, alongside Alex, aka SNESDrunk. Alex, two questions. What the hell are we doing, and how are you doing?
I don't know what the hell we're doing, and I guess it's up to us to find out. We're just kind of feeling our way through this. I have some unexpected free time coming up over the next month, so
I think a lot of us do.
A lot of us do, so I thought it might be fun to do something like this. And the reason I've always wanted to do a podcast of sorts because there are some topics, I guess, that I would love to talk about regarding the whole YouTube process, kind of like how the sausage is made, so to speak. And I would love to get to know, the goal of this podcast eventually is to get other folks on that also have YouTube channels, so they can tell us about their experiences with dealing with YouTube, with dealing with why they choose the videos that they make, or what it's like to deal with some of the commenters or things of that nature. I really like talking about the creative process with different folk, including yourself. So
yeah, well, I cheat by getting on this podcast early because I have a very young channel and it's still in its infancy stages. All of my comments are positive. I get all thumbs up right now, so my doomsday is coming. But,
it will, yeah, believe me. You do.
I mean, hopefully that's the reward. The worse the comments are, the better your channel is.
That's when you know you've made it, when you start getting there's absolutely like a threshold you reach where you get these like randos that show up out of nowhere that are just like nitpicking absolutely like your word choice and sentences, and they pick apart the title of the video, and they're like looking for things to complain about. Once you've reached that point, then it's like, all right, now we're really taking off. But yeah, just to expand, I know some. Well, let's be honest, I think most people know the SNESDrunk channel because I'm going to be posting this on Twitter and all over the place, and including on the YouTube community channel page to make sure that people are able to access this. But I also want to let people know about NESFriend, and that is a that is a channel rather that goes over all sorts of different Nintendo games, and you don't hold back when it comes to, like, I think you've done board games, or was it game show games or board
game
games?
Show games,
Game show games, that's what it was. Everything from that to Abadox, that really gross shooter.
A lot of eyeballs and teeth in that one.
Yeah, and I'm morbidly fascinated with that game. You've done the bases loaded games, like you're all over the map with NES stuff, which I really appreciate. So if you, I will just go right out and say it. I am totally biased, obviously, but if you like the SNESDrunk channel, then do yourself a favor and check out the NESFriend channel as well.
And there's a reason you should enjoy NESFriend if you like SNESDrunk. It's because I almost ripped it off one for one. Completely, actually. This is sort of a funny story. When I started it right after my daughter was born in late 2018, and I had that 8 weeks of dad leave, and somehow with a newborn I got bored. I did. She slept a lot more than I expected, so I had a lot of free time with a laptop on my lap and was just like, watching a ton of your videos. I think I watched every Angry Video Game Nerd and every Metal Jesus. I mean, there's just a lot of time.
Wow,
believe it or not.
That's a lot of hours.
Yeah. Maybe not all of them, but all the ones I hadn't seen up to that point. So I was like, I wonder if I could do this. And I think at some point I had talked to you about this, whether it be on Twitter or through DM or some like really loose conversation. I was like, do you ever intend to do more NES stuff? Because that's sort of like the the library I grew up on and cut my teeth on, and still had this, like, it's still kind of mysterious to me, even though I own most of them. And I wanted that level that you've done with the SNES stuff and moved on to the Genesis stuff. I wanted that on the Nintendo. And you were like, no, I don't really have any real intention of dipping down into there. I mean, you do on occasion by request, but not really something you'd focus on. And I was like, man, if you want something, sometimes you just got to do it yourself.
Yeah.
So I wrote a couple and recorded a couple, and I showed my wife the first one, and she noticed that there were parts where she's like, why do you even sound like him? Like, I was almost inflecting my voice the way that you did. And I was like, am I aping him too much? Am I really channeling too much drunk? And she's like, yeah, maybe scale it back and do a little more you. I was like, okay, all right. So I was wearing my inspiration on my sleeve to start, but I've slowly tried to make it my own thing, putting some of the commercials in there, having like an intro, outro segment with some history and fun facts, and really tried to morph it. Once I became comfortable with the process, morph it into something that's a little more my own, but I owe it to you for all the inspiration.
Well, that's very humbling. It's always very cool to hear that. I started mine back in 20, we're going kind of by an outline here. I'll just let the audience hear behind the curtain here. And it says, acquaint the audience to what we do. And, there's always a chance someone who listens to this has no idea who we are and what we do. So, so some of you out there have heard this a million times, but I got laid off from my job in the summer of 2013. I was in the middle of trying to write a book. And it was, I really hit a wall. Like, I didn't know what else to do, where to go. I was really starting to hate it. So I indulged in another hobby, the Super Nintendo stuff. And I wanted to try and find out more information about certain games I didn't know a whole lot about. And excuse me, sorry. I want to say it was the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers fighting game. Because I heard that game was like really good and a lot different than people thought. And I remember looking for videos on that game, and there were like two. And one was, I just remember the one was like a guy pointing his webcam at his TV, and it's just all bleary, and you can't see anything, and he's just rambling. And then there's this guy, and he's part of the show, and I'm just like, you gotta do better than this, man. Like, there's got to be better stuff out there. There's got to be a better way to do this. So I decided to try and start my own thing, and turns out people like it. So that's cool.
Evidently, if you keep it short, concise, and keep your face out of it, it kind of goes pretty far, huh?
Yeah, I guess the big inspiration for me was the Siskel and Ebert TV show from the 80s and 90s, because
wow,
it was like, they just said, here's the movie, here's what we think of it, okay, next movie. They didn't even spend more than 5 minutes on each movie, unless it was like a big blockbuster or something. And I was just like, why isn't there something like for that for video games? There needs to be something like that for video games. So, and why isn't there something like that for modern games?
No doubt. Yeah. Yeah. I'd be excited to see that for just about any library there is. And obviously, 6-7 years in for you, you've had to dip out, obviously well out of Super Nintendo and doing some arcade stuff and the occasional Steam game. So, you're branching out. But yeah, it would be nice to have that as just a standard.
I think it should be in every media format. There should be a Siskel and Ebert format for like books, for podcasts, for anything. Like, what is this podcast? Is it any good? And that sort of thing, like a review thing. But yeah.
So about this book, what did anything ever come of it?
Oh no, it's she's gonna hate me for saying this. I had Pearl read it, and she was very nice. She's helpfully suggested like a few tweaks to it, and it made me realize I'd have been approaching the whole thing wrong. I was doing it from first person, and it's very obvious it should have been done from a third person perspective. So it's like, I'm seriously gonna, if I want to do this, I'm gonna have to start over. Wow. And she still feels guilty about that, but she's absolutely right. It's like, this first person makes this guy sound like a know-it-all. He's a snob. He's unlikable. If I want this to go the way I want it to go, it needs to be from third person. So I would have to start over from nothing. So
just no energy to do that.
No, it's just it's permanently on hiatus, I guess.
So ever since then, you shifted all of your creative energies into, I guess, I'm SNES drunk. And how did it kind of start? Was it just like one video a week? Because I wasn't around then. I came around when you had like 300 subscribers, and I really thought you were going to be a drunk guy telling me about Super Nintendo games. And initially,
a lot of people still think that.
Like many people, I was a little disappointed.
Yeah,
but then I was really like, well, actually, this is really good.
They get really mad. They're like, "What the hell is this? I thought you're supposed to be wasted." And I was like, "No, sorry." Yeah, no, it started as just one game. Really, it wasn't even one per week. It was one because some videos took a really long time to make. I remember the Final Fantasy VI video taking a really long time to get the appropriate amount of footage I wanted for it. The Chrono Trigger one, I knocked out all the, while I was out of work, I knocked out all the big RPGs like right away. Like I think I did Mario RPG, Chrono Trigger, both Lufia games. What else was there? I don't even remember.
Secret of Evermore was kind of
Secret of Evermore. Yeah. So yeah, it was just one a week, and then I wanted to introduce a second one where I go into other like Steam, Sega Genesis, Game Boy, and now arcade stuff. And I freaking love this arcade stuff. It's so much fun. The games are so simple. Like, right. It's just every video is basically like, look at this. So I really enjoy that.
And it's such a wild west of titles too.
Oh, it's fantastic, especially the games that have not been released elsewhere. In fact, just the other day I found out about Batman Forever Arcade. Have you heard of that?
I don't know. I don't think so.
It has a similar look to how the console games look for Batman Forever, which is notoriously one of the worst games ever. But it takes like that same kind of the Mortal Kombat style graphics with the characters. Mm-hmm. But it does it in a way that's, arcade beat 'em up. And so it's really cool and super energetic and way out there. It's just another example of another game where it's like, holy crap, like where did this come from? So it's really interesting stuff.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite parts about your channel in general is just, right now you have like over 750 videos. You probably don't even remember half the videos that you made. But just being able to discover random games that some of them had no business existing, but a lot of them was like, wow, this exists and it's good and I've never heard of it. That's like the holy trifecta.
Yeah.
That's always the good times.
Yeah. I'm finding out that arcade is the way to go with checking all those boxes.
Absolutely. So was it 2013? Is that when you started?
Fall of 2013. And yeah, it's
that's crazy.
I can't believe it's been that long. It's very strange. But yeah, no, I blame my mom because I've always had to have some sort of creative thing going. I used to record music. I've done a lot of writing in the past. I remember when I was a kid, I used to make fake newspapers and fake box scores of the Minnesota Twins beating whoever, and I'd like make up stats and stuff like that. So it's always been one of those. My mom was a painter, painted oils and pastels and stuff like that, and so
that's cool.
She was a big.
You've always had a bit of the creative blood.
Yeah, I blame her. Yeah,
fair enough. Yeah, I was just thinking, we were talking about how SNES Drunk may be a little misleading in terms of you're not really slurring your speech during your videos, but thinking about the people that might stumble upon this podcast thinking it's a way to meet girls in college or something.
I am sipping a beverage, so yeah.
Oh, same.
Right,
same.
right on. So
yeah, figured I'd loosen up for this.
I mean, would it really be that much better for both talking like Barney Gumble? Like, hey, how you doing?
I doubt it, but maybe.
It would be I've been so tempted in the past to be like, okay, here's what's gonna happen. I'm gonna start drinking on a Saturday at noon, and I'm gonna write a review of a game, and then I'm gonna do every aspect of what I do, but I'm gonna do it wasted and see what happens. When in reality, if I did that, if I started drinking at noon, I'd be in bed by 1:30. I'd be taking a nap. It's like that's not possible for somebody. I'm gonna be 38 in a few weeks, so it's just like I'm old. I can't like just get that wasted and actually be a functioning human being anymore.
There is something about the mid-30s where drinking after an hour or so, I feel like the night used to get more fun, but now it does just get sleepy times.
Oh, it's like male menopause. It's like it's like what the hell? Like, where's my energy? It's gone.
Yeah, so I named mine Ness Friend, which my wife was still like, wow, that's still kind of close to drunk. It's got an R in it. And I was like, come on, cut me some slack. Cut me some slack. She's like, couldn't you have called it anything? I mean, he has Ness in the front, you have Ness in the front, and then Friend, Drunk. It's like that. I really just, it was a placeholder. At first, I called it Nessology, and then my buddy was like, there's 17 channels called that. I was like, well, I guess I can't do that then. So I just put Friend in as a placeholder and then kept it because I was too lazy to think of anything else.
Well, I mean, the word friend is very welcoming.
I know. It's kind of helping, too.
I
think it's driving the positive vibes, to be honest.
It must be, yeah. I think it's a solid name. It's 2 syllables, Ness Friend. So it's easy to remember.
Nice. Absolutely.
It's not too complicated.
That's right. And thankfully, because of this, I've made some friends along the way, so no complaints here.
Right on. So let's get into how are you picking games, and what are you like, what piques your interest when it comes to making videos?
Yeah, a little more about how that sausage is made. So the first few videos I made, maybe the first, 9 or 10, were based purely off of self-interest, just whether I had a love for the series, like the 1942, 1943s or Contra, or if I was just kind of curious about it, because like Little Samson, like that's an important game because it's really rare and expensive, but what's it like? How's it play?
That's important to know, really, because it's that's been expensive not just overnight. That's been expensive for 2 decades now.
Oh yeah.
So it's gonna.
When I got in the hobby, that was immediately the white whale that everyone talked about.
It's piqued a lot of interest because of that.
Yeah, so games like that were alluring, and at some point I realized that I was really just avoiding playing a lot of the games on my shelf in general, because I do collect, and I've collected for a long time. And that was actually my first interaction with you, as I interviewed you on a little series on my main podcast, Polykill, called Collect Call. And even though I knew you weren't a big collector, I think you're certainly a nice resource for several collectors or several people that own or have access to bukus and bukus of retro video games. So you seemed to make sense at the time, and plus it seemed cool to talk to you then.
Cool.
It does now too, by the way. But I realized, I have this full-time job. I'm really busy. I'm a dad, but I still love this collecting hobby. But a lot of times, honestly, a lot of games get ignored. And so I went through this process where I downloaded this app that I keep my collection cataloged in. It's called the Retro Collector Suite. You actually have to pay to get all the consoles you want, but you start off with a free one. And it has a feature on there where after you load your collection, you can hit random, and it'll just throw up a game. And I just use that, and I don't argue with it. That's why I ended up doing game show games. It was because I was like, well, I can't argue with it. Let's see what these are made of. It actually ended up being a kind of fun video because I pulled some footage of the old game shows.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Yeah, I really enjoy how the NES had to, was pretty limited, and so it had to kind of work with its limitations to come up with a way to present these games. So it's always kind of interesting to see what the NES spin is on that stuff.
Yeah, and it's also really interesting how pop culture of the time drove the conception of a lot of these games. Like, there did not need to be a win, lose, or draw on the NES. Like, you can play that with paper. Like, you don't need. I mean, it's actually you can't make diagonals or circles with the NES controller.
Oh my god, I didn't even think of that.
It's a worse experience altogether. Like, why does it have to exist? So stuff like that's really interesting to me. It's like they were really just trying to, pair everything with every, toy line, and everything popular had to have an NES game with it. Every movie, every, whatever. And a lot of it was garbage. And I think sometimes that's hilarious. Sometimes it's frustrating to play. But in the end, I think it's all pretty interesting to learn about. So the random feature kind of drives that, because it forces me into some situations where I actually end up coming away being, learning something, or sometimes even discovering a game that I thought was garbage based on the title, and I was like, it's actually pretty fun. So
how do you take
random feature?
How do you take notes and do research and all that sort of stuff?
I actually am only just now getting good at taking notes, and I do remember you talking about this on that Collect Call interview. You said that you would always take notes on games, and I think you highlighted it recently, maybe on Twitter or something. You showed some old notes. I can't remember, but
you're talking about like from grade school.
Yeah, like you said you'd always done that. And I was like, man, that's impressive because I've like never done that. I just always relied on my memory.
I freaking loved that as a kid because it made me feel like I was like, ooh, he's super knowledgeable about, or all I had was a bunch of passwords and stuff copied from the classified information. Cool, and I didn't even have an NES. I just liked having the codes and stuff like that. And I've talked about this before, but the tipping point for me was Mega Man 3. And when it had that, there was a issue of Nintendo Power that had Metal Storm on the cover, and in the classified information section, it had this chart that detailed every single weapon, boss weapon, how many hits it would take to kill each boss with each weapon. It was like a big grid. And that just blew my mind as a kid. I was like, holy crap, there's an actual science behind how these games work. You don't just run to the right and shoot stuff. It's like you need to plan ahead what you're doing, and you have to use certain weapons at certain times. And that's really what like started it for me. It was like, holy crap, like this is like a whole how can anybody play this game without this chart? So I was like, okay, I gotta copy this down. And it looks sloppy as hell and terrible, but yeah, that was my introduction kind of to like the how stuff was supposed to work in video games. Instead of
to this day, you still take notes. I mean, probably a little more legibly, but that's still part of the process. Yeah.
It starts with obviously just playing the game and then just making casual observations, like what does this game remind me of? Just really just anything, like anything that comes to mind, whether it's like dumb jokes, dumb observations, this guy looks like John Stossel or whatever. And then from there I start looking into, okay, how many lives do you get, how many levels are there, does it have a battery save, is there a password system? I kind of have a checklist that I go by now to make sure that I check everything. And even with that, I miss things sometimes. I just forget to put stuff in there sometimes, just the way it is, I guess. But
yeah, I'm sure the comment section keeps you well aware of what you missed.
Of course, yeah, that's what they're there for. It's so it goes from there, and then I take all those notes and I flesh it out into a script, which is by far the hardest part of the whole process. It is. I'm sure you can identify with this when you've got just a blank screen with the cursor flashing. You want to write something, but it's just like there's nothing coming up. It's just like, what do I do?
I'm actually kind of the opposite.
Really?
Yeah. So I wish, to go back to the notes real quick, I do wish I took better notes. I've started recently, but I found that my notes are just they devolve into just a list of angry complaints that I'm experiencing. And they don't really become a rich source of review fodder. Because a lot of those complaints I end up just washing out because I'm like, that's a given. Yeah, don't even need to bring that up. Yeah, I can just show that, not say it. Like I just kind of go through that process of weeding it out. But I actually enjoy writing the scripts because I think it has a lot to do with my job, which is I do research for a living, and a lot of it is very technical, and it's very confined, and it's very sterile, and it's very rigid, and I have to write in very plain, descriptive.
Oh,
I have
like
to say
writing
that is red,
like
and that
writing
is black.
manuals, basically.
Essentially, yes. And so when I get to write about one of these games, I kind of like having that creative,
Sure, you get to put your
motivation.
spin on things instead of having it all dry.
Exactly, yeah, and I always try to lead off with something kind of funny or something like that. So that's kind of how I get started. Now, that's not to say it's not always easy to do, but I do enjoy that part sometimes more than playing the game. And this is actually true for some videos I'm working on. I was doing the X-Men games for the NES, which, spoiler alert, they're ass. They're not good.
Oh no.
And
I know the regular X-Men game is just a piece of garbage.
It's so bad.
Yeah,
they're both pretty bad.
What's the other one? Spider-Man and X-Men?
It's just Wolverine.
Oh God, yeah. That
Yeah.
one's that was I just yeah. That's I just did the Super Nintendo one not too long ago. It's
also
it's terrible.
not great. It's better than the X-Men game, but it's still not good. But I suffered through those, and I definitely didn't beat them legitimately. Spoiler alert for everybody: we cheat to get a lot of our footage. We don't actually beat all of these games.
I get that question a lot too. Like, how many games have you beaten at this point? It's like
8. But
yeah, no, I mean, with obviously with some of the RPGs, it's gonna you have to make yourself stop, otherwise it's gonna dominate all of your free time. But with even with platformers and whatever, I'm using passwords. I'm using save states if I have to. I will say this: when I first sit down and play a game, I do spend as much, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, however long I need to get a really good feel for the game, get as far as I can. I don't do any cheats. I don't do any passwords or anything like that, unless I have to, do something else, and then I'll come back to it. But after that, then my second playthrough is when I go through with, I start getting an idea of what I want to talk about, and then I start picking particular parts of the game that I know I'm going to need footage for, so I skip ahead or skip, use passwords or save states or whatever it might be to get to a certain point. So the answer is we haven't beaten very many. But granted, some games are super easy to beat. There was one that was the other. I just finished one that I did not too long ago.
Was like Primal Rage or something?
Oh yeah, no. I was gonna say the arcade games are super easy to beat because you just keep throwing in, you keep pressing that 5 button. Oh, Poppin' Twinbee. It's the shoot 'em up that just came out on the Switch Online service. That one is reasonably, it's a shoot 'em up, so the playthrough's only about 40, not even 40 minutes. So games like that are, it's like it's not too much to ask to, get all the footage for that game just by playing it, as you normally would. But then there's games like Gogol 13 on NES, which is like this wonky game that's got all sorts of different game modes, and it's kind of good but kind of not, and you got to make do with whatever it is you can to. You
got a lot of 3D mazes, right? Like,
yes,
kind of
and those suck.
Yeah.
They have those trap doors that fall beneath you, and it's such bullshit. I hate that. Sorry, I know I said I was gonna. Sometimes it comes out.
It's all good. I sometimes my process is I typically I play the games, and sometimes I'll play. I kind of consider like about an hour and a half of footage to be good. So I don't know if do you record both of those playthroughs that you do?
Yeah. Well, as much as I can. There's a premium on space to a certain extent.
Right.
So I can't record. I kind of pick and choose my spots now. But
especially for the RPGs, you're probably just.
My God, yeah. I saw Pam, otherwise known as Cannot Be Tamed. On Twitter the other day. Yes, she said she got like how many gigs of like 50,
it's like 91 or something.
Yeah, 91 gigs of footage. I'm like, good God, like what you've got like a 4 terabyte gig hard drive or something? Like holy crap.
Yeah, my poor Elgato would just pass out from that.
Like holy cow. Yeah, I still get requests for stuff like what is it called? The Dreamcast RPG, where Skies of Arcadia.
Oh yeah,
that was one where I definitely had to okay, here's a battle I can get, record for 10 minutes, and then go back. Oh, here's a story sequence I can get. Oh, here's a cool little cinematic thing I can get. So I was definitely, I definitely can't sit there and just record everything.
Yeah,
you just have to be smart on when to pick your spots.
Yeah, so sometimes because I kind of have this about an hour and 10, hour and a half minute, I'm good kind of feel after most of these games, because I'll play it I usually will start naively recording that, and that's usually no footage that I use. Like the first run through is just me figuring out buttons and dying stupidly, and I'm not going to show that in the video. Like I do have some dignity. and that's just me. I don't even know why I hit record then, but I'm like, well, if it's good, I don't want to waste that time. So I record all that. But it's usually like the second playthrough where I'm a little better at it. And then eventually I'll hit a wall where I'm like, okay, now it's NES hard. And then I figure out a way to cheat to show the rest of the levels. But I'll record multiple games like in a night. Like in one night I might do 3 or 4 games and have those exported over. And then I usually write my scripts during downtime at work. Because like I said, I get pent up from all of this sterile language. So I'm like, I kind of want to write it. I'm going to write about Daydreaming Davy or whatever, some bullshit. And because I don't have my footage handy, I actually watch other people's footage online to kind of recall parts of the game.
Sure.
Like, yeah, that's that part. Or I'll see that they did something I didn't do, and I'm like, dang, I'm going to have to go back and record that.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's another thing. You might not be doing something correctly. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it helps to go and watch other people's reviews. It helps. GameFAQs is a huge resource for me.
Big.
Yeah, it's especially for RPGs, so you can get a feel for. Like I just finished a video about King Colossus. It's a Japan-only game for Mega Drive, and it's a action RPG. But there's definitely some stuff that's hard to get to, hard to understand. So GameFAQs is absolutely essential for stuff like that, because there's not a whole lot of other resources for Japan only Mega Drive game. There's just not that much out there.
And you do a surprising amount of import style videos, and I guess some that only have maybe fan translations and that kind of thing.
I just want to find out about it myself. It's
that's just some territory that I'm kind of intimidated to go down, just because it seems like a lot more work than I'm already used to doing for these kinds of videos.
And that can lead to burnout for sure, because like you said, you've got a job, I've got a job, but in addition to that, you have a kid, so that's like a lot of work. It's a lot on your plate.
But I have the curiosity there for a lot of those. It's just a matter of, do I have the time to put a video like that together? Maybe eventually. For now, I kind of like the simple process that I have for these short games. And I was going to say, speaking of GameFAQ, I had a kind of a story from yesterday that I could share. Was that I was playing the Goonies. I'm thinking about doing a video on Goonies 2. That's an NES game, and there's a Goonies for Famicom. And so I was I don't have the Famicom version. I'll just emulate that, and I'll play Goonies 2. And I popped it in and played it for like an hour and a half and was really liking it. And it's kind of like this real convoluted puzzle where you're running through this maze, and there's like a front half of the map and the back half of the map, and you go through doors and come out on the other side, and you have to be like, you have to have a really good memory of where you've been on the other side. It's really kind of messy, but you got to find the other Goonies and all this stuff, and then all of a sudden the game just freezes. And there's no password system or anything like that, so I was like, okay, when I get the gumption, when I get the wind back in my sails, I'm going to the GameFAQs and doing a step-by-step walkthrough until I get back to roughly where I was. So no shame in that. So
there you go. That's perfect. That's a perfect use for it. Yeah, we've all had our horror stories of stuff not record. Like I remember, what was it? I think I was playing 7th Saga actually, and I got 90 minutes in, and my OBS stopped responding, and when it crashed, it didn't save any video footage at all. So.
Oh, that's such a bummer.
I always make sure to record in like chunks of manageable file sizes. That's another thing. Once you get to a certain file size, I don't know about you, but like I use Sony Vegas. So once stuff gets to a like wildly unwieldy like size, Vegas, it's probably just my computer, but Vegas has a hard time dealing with it. Like when you place your cursor in certain spots, there's like a delay. And it's like, this thing's. I can practically see this thing sweat as it's working. So it's, you really have to be careful. It's a lot of it is trial and error, like just trying to figure out what the best process is.
Yeah, no doubt. I actually use. It's called Magix. I think it's available through Steam. It's like
sure, yeah, I know that.
Maybe a lesser grade than Vegas. I'm not sure even how it matches up, but it does okay. But I do try to keep my videos pretty short, and thankfully for NES games, most of the games are more bite size, or at least I can skip through them.
That's true. Unless you're playing Dragon Warrior or something like that.
But I have cheated I say cheat. I've sort of cheated for footage in that there have been games that don't have Game Shark codes, and I am not skilled enough to get very far in. But I could play and get the gist, and I was like, well, I just really want footage of some other parts than what I can record. And so there's a guy that has a YouTube channel that I interact with on Twitter, and he's beaten like 500 NES games, and I'm like, hey man, is it okay if I borrow some of this footage to get some of this,
Sure.
later gameplay? And I did that on some of the Kowai games too, because I'm not sitting there conquering China for 30 hours in the NES. I'm just not going to do it.
You're not?
I'm not going to do it. So I got him, or I asked him if I could borrow some of that footage. It's just him clicking around in menus, but I was like, somebody's going to call me out if it's just the early stages of the game for 5 minutes. So I'd like to get some other
Yeah, that's
shots of
definitely a point of emphasis for me, is to show off. It's a kind of a weird balance. You want to show off enough of the game, but I really try and make it a point not to show off like toward the end, because I don't want to. I got really badgered pretty badly about spoilers early on. Like I was giving away too much of the game. I think the worst instance of it for me personally was when I showed the Mother Brain battle in Super Metroid, when I showed Mother Brain's second form at the end of that one. And that's like kind of a big holy bleep moment,
right?
In any game ever. It's like, oh my god, this is just, the battle is just beginning. So I got it. And in retrospect, that was a dumb idea. I shouldn't have shown that. And so I'm always trying to be careful not to show too much of the game, but yeah, you definitely want to get past a certain point
right
of the game. Like I try and get, like, I was working on the other day another Japan exclusive game. You might have heard of this, Mario and Wario.
Actually, no.
It's a puzzle game, puzzle platformer. It's actually made by Game Freak, the same people the same guy that made Pokemon. And wow. I think it's the last game he made before Pokemon. Never came out in the US. And you play as this fairy named Wanda, and she goes around clicking block. It's one of those escort mission games where Mario's got a bucket on his head. He can't see, so you have to guide him through this maze and get him up to the goal, basically. And
gotcha.
It starts out super easy, but it gets really tough, and it gets tough to the point where it's just like, I can't go any further, so I'm just going to skip to... luckily, it had like a menu on the front that at the beginning of the game that allowed me to skip ahead in the game.
Oh, nice.
But bit of a humble brag, if I may say so myself. I've only used like Game Genie, Game Shark stuff, like I think just twice, maybe.
Wow. I
can't even remember, and one of them was because the game was so absurdly hard. Like I had to use an invincibility code because it was just, because I needed to show more than 3 levels.
Right. I probably used the Game Genie twice last night, so that's pretty impressive, man. Nice brag.
Oh, it's just it depends on the game, really. Like there are some times where. I mean, don't get me wrong, save states definitely help, but
oh yeah,
I hope I'm not giving out the impression to people out there that I'm like this game whiz, that I'm like amazingly good at games, because really I'm totally average Joe. I just kind of, the way I see it is I just want to show off as much of the game as possible. Now, how can I do that? Because that's the whole point.
So this is actually kind of an interesting distinction in your setup. Do you play exclusive emulation for your,
no
you don't? Okay.
I mean, in a way, yeah. I guess, but if I have the cartridge, I'm always using the cartridge, but it's always going to be a blend of the two. My main setup right now is the SD2 SNES Pro flash cartridge. That's for Super Nintendo games. I also have the NES Everdrive and the Sega Genesis edition of that, whatever that's called. I think it's just Sega.
Okay, so you're playing on the original hardware, but
yes.
Okay.
I think it's important to get a feel of the game with the original controller. I think that's huge deal. Like that goes a long way into both understanding what the game was like then and what it's like now. Yeah, I don't think you can do that with like an iBuffalo whatever.
Yeah.
Controller, or God forbid a Gravis pad, but Yeah, right now it's the SD2 SNES Pro through the wonderful Super NT, and the thing that Analog makes, and
Yeah,
that thing
yeah.
is awesome. It is
That
so
is cool.
cool. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm usually using, unless I have the cartridge, and I've got about 140 cartridges, but I've covered most of those games
I was
already.
going to say by now you should have burned through all those.
I think the only ones I haven't, I'm going to turn around and look here. Like, I know Krusty's Funhouse doesn't have one yet. Mickey Mania is another one I don't have. Doesn't have its own video. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, the rest are just like ones I've covered, but just in like compilation
compilation,
videos.
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're just not that interesting to. I guess Mickey Mania would be interesting because that's a game that has a lot of potential, but didn't
Right
really
on.
follow through. Yeah.
So I use an old school NES.
Yeah,
It's the
yeah.
only thing I can record footage from with my setup. Even though I have like several other consoles there, I'm only smart enough to make one work with the Elgato at a time, and I record through my PVM. So I think that's why,
Yeah.
because I have to have like cords going. It's a mess over there.
Oh,
it looks
yeah.
like
my setup is so jank, it's embarrassing.
yeah, it looks like Darth Maul vomited spaghetti all over the back of my wall. It's not good. But
What PVM do you have?
actually, not to brag, but I have 3. I do have.
Dang.
I know they just.
That's pretty cool.
Well, I got to a point where I really wanted one, and I found 3, and I hoarded all of them. It just seemed like a good opportunity at the time.
That's
My
awesome.
wife, not a fan of that move, but
Why not?
they're awesome though. They're all a little bit different. So one of them is actually a BVM, and I don't know what that means other than it doesn't have speakers, which is kind of frustrating.
Huh.
But it's awesome. They're all pretty cool.
Yeah, mine is just a little 8-inch Sony. I can't see the model number from here, but yeah, it doesn't have speakers. It only has the audio output from the back. But
That's what you play your
I love that
or
thing,
record
though.
your footage on.
I mean, I record my footage with OBS, so I use the same Elgato capture thing going into my computer. I have a desktop computer, so
Oh, okay.
it goes
Gotcha.
from. But yeah, no, I use that as my main viewing monitor. And it's this tiny little thing, but I do think it's important, though. Yeah, I just want to stress playing on original hardware, even if it's with a flash cartridge. But I think the controller is like a huge deal.
Yes, I concur with that,
So-
and I guess I was trying to get to that because I try to play games out of my collection, not for any like, nitpicky purist reason, just because I think that this video series is a good way to force me to do that.
Sure.
I don't get the perk of save states, which is why I use the Game Genie quite regularly.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
So, do you think we should get to some questions?
Let's do it.
Okay. So I threw this out here on Patreon, on the SNES Drunk Patreon. Some questions here. I guess I'll start. We're only gonna. I got a heck of a lot of questions, way more than I was expecting. So thank you all that submitted these. And we'll start with Robert from the Classic Gaming Podcast. Hi, Robert. And I highly recommend checking out that podcast. It's always a lot of fun. Those guys have been doing it for years. Him and Jay.
Yeah.
So he asks, what's the worst game that you, for whatever reason, played a ton of? You go first.
The worst game that I, for whatever reason, played a ton of. Off the top of my head, I think of the first game that I can remember playing, and I only years later realized that it wasn't great. And it's actually not terrible, but I thought I was such a badass for beating this when I was like 6 years old, and it's Guerrilla War on the NES.
Oh, yeah.
It's just Infinite Continues, and it's really not a bad game, but I remember going to school, and all of my friends had cool games, like Zelda and Mario 3 and Kirby, and I was like, guys, you've got to play Guerrilla War, and I was married to that game, and I died on that hill several times on the playground, and then years later I had to really just be like, dude, it ain't it's no Mario 3. What was I thinking?
That's how I am with the original Final Fight port to Super Nintendo, where I was just in love with that game. I still love the sound design and the music, and the game looks awesome, but there's no reason to play it now because there's a million other versions of it that are way better. It's a part of the Capcom Beat 'em Up bundle. It's on Sega CD. There's the original arcade, if you want to play it on MAME. So I don't think that's
a Hagar fan.
Yeah. I love that cover art is hilarious. I think my answer to the question though is probably NCAA basketball for Super Nintendo. I can't tell you how many hours I put into that just because I was such a huge basketball fan. And I loved the fact that it had actual schools in it that you could play as. Right. I love the fact that it had really good sounding crowd noise and tournaments and stuff like that. And it kept season stats too.
That was big for sports games back then. Like, if they kept the stats from one game to the next, that was huge.
That was huge. And this kept an average of your points per game, which I thought was like next level when I was a kid. But
crazy.
Playing it now, you really, the first thing you think of is like, what were they thinking when they made this game? Because it's the goofy basketball game with the blue background. And
right.
it rotates around as you pass the ball around, so it's a little nauseating to look at if you're not used to it. But I still like it. I still like to play it, but it's definitely objectively not a good game by any stretch.
I guess you didn't play a ton of Bill Laimbeer's Combat Basketball. You played it, but not a ton of it, so it wouldn't qualify here.
Jesus, I don't know what they were thinking with that game. It's so bad. Yeah. Well, you want to read the next question?
Yes, this next one is from Brian. He asks, what was your most significant / memorable experience with a rented game?
Well, for me, it was the first game I rented. I think it was the first game I rented after we got our Super Nintendo for Christmas. It was playing Contra 3. First of all, getting a Super Nintendo for Christmas, I was 9 years old at the time. And we went from the Atari 2600 to the Super Nintendo.
Big leap.
Yeah, big leap. And while I played NES at friends' houses and stuff like that, I didn't really get all that familiar with it. I didn't feel like it was like part of that big of a part of my life at that point, other than copying codes out of Nintendo Power just so I could have them. But I remember renting Contra 3 and just being like, "Oh my god, this game is like it was like sensory overload. Like I couldn't handle that game. Like it really intimidated the hell out of me for just the first level alone."
Yeah, I bet.
And then
especially when it all breaks down and the fire comes up out of the ground.
The fire out of the ground, the plane bombs everything, and then you've got fire leaping like over you, and then the giant tortoise bursts out of that building.
Oh yeah.
And it's got that weird shriveled exposed heart. Like there's so much there that's just like off the charts awesome. And then
it still kind of stands as even compared to its contemporaries, it's a pretty intense game to look at.
Oh, it really is. Especially when the third level, you've got mini boss after mini boss after mini boss, where you've got that thing that flies around and spin with the spinny propeller things. Then you climb the wall, and this thing climbs up with you, which
cool.
That was where I was just like, okay, I'm gonna pee my pants if I continue to play this game, because this is just beyond anything I can imagine. But yeah, that's it for me. Like that nothing could have topped that for me.
Nice. I think I could probably give two answers here. One of the most memorable experiences with a game, I remember my dad and I like renting several times for whatever reason, maybe the worst football game on the NES, which was Johnny Always Football. I don't know if it was the worst, but it was a football game, and my dad, I mean, he wasn't really into video games, but I knew I could get him to play a football game with me, and I just remember playing that with him all night, and they had this, I don't remember how you could do it. I haven't played that game in years. I should look into it, but I know there's a way, like, you can, like, select something from the playbook that just makes your player stupid fast, to where like nobody on the other team can catch him. My dad would get really mad when I did that, but
nice.
All in good fun,
Yeah.
But there's another experience with renting not a game but a console from a video game store when I was a kid, and I remember being this obnoxious little I couldn't have been, I don't know how old I was, 11, 12, 13, and I really wanted to rent a PlayStation, and the game store there, they had a couple they would rent out, and I remember they kind of came in like bags that looked like Pizza Hut delivery bags. I just thought that was really cool. But I was like, man, I really want to rent a PlayStation this weekend. I talked to my mom, and I don't remember how much it was. It was a little bit more than a game, obviously. But I called on like Friday night, and they said they didn't have any. They were expecting one to come back in, but it hadn't come in yet. And I called again, and they said no, not yet. I called again, and I could kind of tell they were getting annoyed with me, and that kind of affected me. Like, I didn't want to be an annoying kid. And so I waited, and I would call back. I called back like 3 or 4 times, and I would try to do a different accent. And it had to be the most pitiful thing ever. I was like, hello, I'm looking for a PlayStation. Like, I'm like 11 or 12. Like, I'm not good at accents.
Governor, you've got that new PlayStation game, eh?
Yeah, pretty much. And I feel like, I mean, I'm almost certain they knew it was me. Like, I could hear them kind of stifling a laugh. But at this point, they were like, this kid's, pathetic, but kind of cute and desperate. And eventually, they just told me to leave my number, and they would call me when it came in. And
do you remember what accents you used?
Oh, I do remember trying to pull off a Spanish accent. I was really into. We only had like one TV growing up, so I watched a lot of TV with my parents. I tried to pull off a Columbo. I did a lot of cool stuff.
That's impressive.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't great.
Well, I mean, that's I should say that's ambitious.
Sure, absolutely ambitious. I did get the PlayStation though. It was great.
I will say I have a call center. I've worked a lot of years in call centers. One time we got really bored. It was really slow. And we, my friends of mine that worked there and us, we were like 19. We got just really bored with everything. So we started answering, it was for a mail order catalog. People would call in and order stuff. And so we would start talking in accents, and I did like some terrible Scottish accent, and this guy like never even like blinked twice. He's like,
oh, that's the
and
best.
We used to have to upsell too, so it's like, and to go with that, you gotta have some 6-pack of cruise socks. What do you think of that? It was really bad, but yeah, it's.
Did you make it? Did you close any sales?
No, absolutely not. I'm the worst salesperson in human history.
It's all good.
But yeah, no, that story is really freaking funny. That's great. Next, we have Dan from Console Wars, which is a great channel that everybody, if you watch NES Friend, if you watch SNES Drunk, you need to be watching Console Wars. Not only is it funny, it's useful. So what can you?
Right
you
on.
You can't. What's that?
I said right on. Yeah, I watched
right
the
I thought you
Lost
said
Vikings one.
Or both.
Or both. You can like either console. You can be console agnostic and still enjoy that channel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, those guys are great. He asks which old games deserve a remake.
Like I feel like the easy answer is to go for one that I like, but then I'm like, do I really want a remake of something that I really treasured way back when?
Right.
But I don't really know what's a good answer for this, because I honestly also think that they're remaking a lot of stuff I wanted them to. But I really enjoyed Soul Blazer, and I'd like, it's still 16-bit, but they've sort of brought Castlevania back in some way with like Curse of the Moon or whatever, and Sonic Mania came back. There's been some revitalizations, so I would like just to carry that legacy forward. Still give me a 16-bit version of it, but make it new and shiny. Put it on Switch. I'd be happy with doing that.
You're referring to Bloodstained, I think.
Probably, yeah. I can't remember the names of those.
Castlevania thingy, yeah.
Yeah, they're like Bloodstained, and then after that, I can't remember. It's like Circle of the Curse and Curse of the Moon. I can't remember them all.
I'm pretty sure somebody made like a Castlevania subtitle generator out there that's just like
yeah,
Sorrow of the Moon within the Venus or something. Yeah.
Yes, that sounds like one.
Mine would be along the same lines, I think, because it's like you said, there's some games that probably shouldn't be remade, like Super Metroid.
Right.
Like I'm perfectly fine with Chrono Trigger. I'm perfectly fine with like, I could turn it around to look at some other games, but it's like there's a lot of games I'm perfectly okay with. Like Contra 3 is fine the way it is. But a game like Terranigma, Not only because it would get a worldwide release, presumably, but because it has a very heavy story and a very surprising ending. And again, it's part of the Soul Blazer trilogy, so to speak.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, that's the one that I think of. That I think it's Quintet. I think there's like a few games that they made that, or well, maybe a few, but that's the one that I think I really wanted to play that never made it over here.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, it's Soul Blazer, Illusion of Gaia, and Terranigma. And Terranigma has a pretty heartbreaking ending, and it's a really interesting story made in an era when that wasn't very common. So I'd love to see what kind of reaction it would get today, if anything. Plus, it's an action RPG, and RPGs for the most part have transitioned to that entirely, haven't they? Like Final Fantasy 15, and then you've got like the Final Fantasy 7 remake is all action, so. Yeah, that's my answer for that one.
Good call. Our last one here is from Burger Champ.
That's a quality name.
Sounds fun. What game did you see in Nintendo Power, EGM, GamePro, and had to have, even though you never got it? You just had to have it.
For me, this is kind of cheating, but there was, I can't remember what it was on the cover of this Nintendo Power, but it was right before the Super Nintendo came out, and it had this big poster of screenshots of every game. Not every game, but like I would say probably had screenshots of about 40 games, and it had everything from all the early titles, everything from Final Fantasy 2. Well, they called it Final Fantasy 2, even though it was 4. Right. They had Zelda back when they called it Zelda 3 instead of Link to the Past. They had like that in there, but the ones I wanted the ones that like just looked different and weird. Like, and of course I was huge into sports games, so I really wanted Bulls versus Blazers. I did rent that one, and it was super fun at the time, and it has not held up well over time for sure. But it's really choppy. But I just remember looking at that poster and just being like, oh my god, there's so many games, I'm never gonna get to play any of them. And lo and behold, here we are with emulation and all that good stuff. We can play them anytime we want.
Yeah, and you have 768 videos to your name, documenting every single one of them.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I like those posters where the flip side is the ad for tons of games. Yeah. I actually frame a bunch of those, and I don't even have the poster side out. I actually prefer to have like the little catalog of old games being the side that shows, just because it's just more fun to look at. But anyway, my answer would be, it's definitely sports related. I can remember specifically being in a grocery store with a bunch of my friends, and we were flipping through some video game magazines. We weren't going to buy them, obviously. Our parents were out getting milk, and we're just flipping through the magazines real quick, standing around. And I remember finding an ad for John Madden Football, and this had to be around 95, 96, and it showed like, it was like really zoomed in on like the players and the line of scrimmage, like the linemen were all big and everything was zoomed in, and I'm pretty sure they were showing a screenshot of like a replay mode on maybe like the Saturn or the PlayStation or something like that. And all I had was like a Genesis, but at the bottom, it showed all these things. It was like John Madden is back, full 3D, all this other stuff, and at the bottom it said like for Saturn and PS1 and Genesis, and I was like, oh, I have a Genesis, it'll probably look just like that. No, sure didn't. Boy, was I stupid. But that would have been too disappointed in the end. But I was kinda should have known better.
That probably would have been what, Mad 96?
Yeah,
somewhere around there,
96, 97. Yeah.
Yeah, the Genesis version at that point was not like neither the Genesis or the Super Nintendo versions of those games. Not great.
Certainly not. Yeah. Not at all. But man, was I fooled by a screenshot of a really close-up football. I don't know what I was thinking.
They still kind of pull that tactic nowadays where they don't show, they'll preview a game and they only show like cutscene footage, and they don't show they're getting better about that, but it's still like, can you actually show some game footage, please? That would be really nice. But
Sports games look spectacular now, though. Like,
oh my God.
I was on Twitch the other day. I was going to log in to watch a buddy play something, and they had like people like on the main screen when you just go to the main Twitch page. And I don't watch a lot of folks stream, so I'm not real savvy with it. But on like the main page, it was just showing like a rotary of different channels that were active, and one of them, I guess they were having like an NBA 2K league. And for like the first, solid 2 minutes, I thought it was an act because it was kind of compressed into a small screen. I was like, "Are they showing NBA games on Twitch? Are you allowed to do that?" And it was several minutes of me watching it before I realized it wasn't real. Like that's pretty impressive.
I think it's the Phoenix Suns team. The NBA season has obviously been suspended. They're actually going on and playing their games on Twitch, like they're through 2K.
Wow.
Like they're playing their schedule as it would have been.
That's
which
awesome.
Is a really clever touch. Yeah, those guys are great.
That's awesome.
But we're coming up on an hour here, so I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, have we done an episode here?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're about to wrap this one up. So next week, I don't even know if we're going to do this. Is going to be a weekly thing or what. We'll see. But what we'd love to do is have some other YouTubers on as guests. We have a few people in mind that we would love to have on and ask, similar kind of discussion topics that we talked about here, like what your creative process is like, how did you get started, what makes you do what you want to do, that sort of thing. And we've got plenty of people in mind for that. So stay tuned. We're still working out the details as to where this will be uploaded eventually and what the hell we're doing in general.
Yeah, what are we doing?
So if you like this, let us know. If you have any feedback, let us know. I'm going to post this probably on Patreon first, since they're the folks that were asking questions and stuff. I'll roll it out on other platforms here and there. As we go, and I think it'll get a full post somewhere. I don't know. I would think on Friday or Saturday. Does that sound all right?
Sounds good to me, man.
Okay.
It'll be the quickest anything has ever come together for me, considering it was a half-assed joke tweet I made to you that eventually turned into us recording a podcast 2 days later. I think it's pretty impressive.
That's kind of neat. Well, I mean, it's just like, you know what? That sounds pretty good. This dude's got... I like this guy, and he's got, a lot of gaming experience. He's got his own channel, for one thing, so he can identify with the whole process that goes behind how to do this sort of thing. So it's a good... And plus, you've got tons of other podcasts and podcasting experience.
I should tout those here. If you weren't so annoyed by me throughout this episode, you can find me also on the Polykill podcast, and I also do another podcast called Off Kilter. But the Polykill podcast is gaming oriented, so if you're more interested in the gaming side of stuff, look there for that.
And for me, you can just go to snestruck.com and watch stuff.
Yes, plenty of stuff. Days of stuff.
There's a bunch of stuff there that's you can watch. So, all right, we're going to sign off from here. Thanks for taking the time to listen, and enjoy the rest of your day.
See ya.